Dr. Demetre Daskalakis, thank you so much for sitting down and spending a little bit of time with me.
Thanks, David. Thanks for having me.
I want to just quickly run through your bio so everyone gets an idea of who you are and what you've done. You got your bachelor's degree from Columbia, your MD from NYU, you did your residency at Harvard, you got an MPH from Harvard, and after that, you worked as an attending physician in New York. You were the medical director at Mount Sinai. You rose to be the deputy commissioner of the New York City Department of Health and mental hygiene. Did I get that right? Yeah.
You got
Uh,
it.
and, and then you were recruited to be at the CDC and work in their division of HIV prevention. And then you were the director of immunization and respiratory diseases at the CDC, which is just an incredible title. You worked on responding to the mpox epidemic. So just genuinely a really impressive resume. And what I wanted to ask you about first is because you came to the CDC under the Biden administration and stayed through in the transition in Trump and when RFK became the HHS secretary, and obviously the CDC is a works under the HHS department. And so I really wanted to ask you, what did you notice the difference between working in the Biden CDC versus working under RFK Jr.?
Yeah, and David, I'm just going to tell you one thing was I'm actually hired by Trump one. So I was hired in the first Trump administration, and then I joined at the end of December 2020. So didn't have a lot of time under under Trump one, but did have some time under Biden and Trump two. Um, so I think that the main difference is that coming from the CDC perspective is that CDC I think was given under the Biden administration way more ability to communicate to people about what's going on. And so I think that that probably is the number one main difference, which is that when the new Trump administration came in, all of a sudden there were like blackouts on some communication, some things got a lot slower. And then the next thing that happened that was different is that pretty much all of CDC got sidelined, and it kind of became like a wolf in sheep's clothing, where rather than like stuff coming out of CDC that was really CDC, it had like the CDC name on top, but it was really being generated out of the secretary's office or someone in the secretary's universe. So it's a lot different, and really not what people I think want to see out of the premier health department organization in the world, if not the country, if not the world.
Sounds like it was a complete shift from previous on the administrations, because it sounds like normally it works from bottom up where the recommendations come, and now we're getting a top down funnel from our
Yeah.
science.
I mean, yeah, with the addition to say that like the scientists have no idea what's about to hit because it's just coming out of HHS under a CDC under like a CDC moniker. So I think it's like that it's like it's like not only top down, it's just top. There's no down.
That's that's even more that somehow it's worse than I thought it would be.
It is
Wonderful.
worse than you think it is. Indeed.
uh so I'm sure that you obviously resigned from the CDC a few months ago, I believe. I don't know the exact date, but you
End of
spent
August. Yeah.
end of August. So you spent a good 6 months working under Trump 2 and under RFK. I'm sure that was incredibly challenging. Uh what was the line for you? What was the specific line? I'm sure you and your colleagues had different things, and I'm sure you also spent a lot of time thinking about, well, if I leave the CDC, am I doing more damage than if I stay?
Sure.
But eventually you got to a point where you said, I can't sign off on what's happening here anymore. What was that what crossed that line for you?
I think I kind of answered it a bit, which is like when it was clear that it was not just top down with ability by scientists and folks who have government and career experience in the agency to be able to mitigate it. Which we did like so many things. Like I can make a list. Like they changed the vaccine schedule on Twitter. They didn't tell us anything about it, but we mitigated that. They fired all the people that knew anything about vaccine in the advisory committee. we mitigated that too as best we could. But when it was clear that what they were doing was um, really making CDC into a wolf in sheep's clothing, it then became for me impossible to stay because I would then be not telling you that it's a wolf in sheep's clothing, number one, and B, be part of that sheep's clothing, right? So, everyone has a different line, but for me, as the head of of vaccines and respiratory diseases, when they were like, you're really not involved anymore in any of the sort of vaccine sort of policy setting or discussions. And when I heard that my boss was told you're not allowed to make any decisions around vaccine, even though that was her job, it became pretty clear that that there was nothing else to mitigate. And by staying there, I was doing harm. And again, I'm a doctor, David, and the thing that I had to swear to when I graduated from med school was first to do no harm. And I thought that I couldn't do that anymore.
Yeah, I think that's really understandable, and I really appreciate you sharing. And in general, I think one of the things that makes you such an effective public health doctor is I think that you understand that good health policy is worthless if you can't communicate it effectively to people.
That's right.
Uh, and you mentioned you were talking about, I think, the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices
Yep.
at CDC. They recently changed their recommendation to recommend moving the HepB vaccine to making an individualized medical decision for newborns. Why do you think that that's problematic or dangerous?
Yeah. So really, those words like really mean something different in the policy universe than they do sort of to normal people, right? So every vaccine is really an individual decision between the doctor, the patient, or the doctor and the patient's parent. And so what they did was they sort of said that for kids of moms that are hepatitis B negative, you can make the decision whether or not you want to get the vaccine. By the way, you always can make the decision about that. But what they did was to create more barriers and also doubt, both in parents as well as in pediatricians about how safe that vaccine actually is. So generally, when you use something that's like that individual level decision making, when you use that, that means that there's like some risk that you need to consider differently because the benefit may not be as great for some people. That's not the case in this circumstance, because history will tell the answer. Like, before the birth dose of hepatitis B was implemented, there were tens of thousands of cases of hepatitis B in kids in the U.S. Hepatitis B is a virus that doesn't cause necessarily a big problem on day one of your infection, but decades later can lead to liver cancer and to scarring of your liver that may need a transplant or worse. When you're my age, which is very old, but when you're my age, if I get hepatitis B, about 95% of the time I'm going to clear it. And 5% of the time I go on to chronic disease that can mean complications in like 5 to 10 years. A newborn, 90% of them who get it will not clear it. They will go on to chronic hepatitis B, which means that their liver continues to be exposed to this thing. And then 25% of them will die early because of liver cancer or liver failure. So, so back in the day, tens of thousands of newborns used to get this infection. And the initial thing that people did was say, well, you know what? We're going to test high risk moms. And if the mom's negative, then we're good. And if they're positive, we're not. And so they did that, and it didn't reduce the number of cases by very much. So then they said, you know what? We're just going to test everyone, all the moms, regardless of risk for hepatitis B, and then base our decision to vaccinate. If the mom's positive, we do something. If the mom's negative, we don't, or we wait. That didn't get the numbers down either. In 1991, they started the universal vaccine at birth, and we went from tens of thousands of cases to like a couple dozen a year. And so they put us in a time machine at the Advisory Committee for Immunization Practices, but ignored the past and are taking us back to let's decide what to do with the vaccine based on someone's test, assuming that the system is perfect and everyone gets tested and that the test is perfect as well. And so the stakes are high. 25% of kids with chronic infection dying, that could be prevented with a vaccine that's really, really easy and that has very, 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 few side effects and a favorable risk benefit profile. They put us in a time machine, and unfortunately, like, we know what the answer will be over time.
That's really depressing.
Yeah. Yeah, they didn't use any data. They just said here. Like, so the CDC produced all this great data 2 meetings ago that they presented, that talked about what I just said, but they spent like hours presenting it, and I did it in like two
Yeah,
minutes.
like my
You
audience
know,
appreciates that.
just how it goes. But that data got completely ignored, and then they had people presenting at the advisory committee meeting who were environmental scientists, so people that look out for, like, toxins in the environment, and they presented about hepatitis B with great authority when they have none. And so they made the decisions without data that necessarily went through any process to be considered whether the data is good or bad. They pretty much went on vibes. The vibe was that they wanted to change it because someone told them, and then they changed it. And so that's what you see.
Dimitri, you got this. I have a rant that I have not really put online yet, but I guess I am now. I say this with my best friend all the time, that we are a country that is just that strictly runs on vibes and that nothing else
Vibes.
matters. And I gotta say, the fact that I am right, even when it comes to public health, is terrifying. Like, I don't know if you can
Yeah,
see it in my face, but
I
but
agree.
the fact that even our public health runs on vibes is it's terrifying. Sorry.
It runs on
Uh,
vibes. Like, there's more
um,
vibes coming. Like,
and
right?
and,
It's
and, and
all
I think
vibes,
and
vibes,
I
vibes.
think they can tell that they run on that they know the country runs on vibes, because when I read the decision, I made sure to read their decision for you word for word, because I thought their wording was so interesting about making an individualized decision. Like, they make it seem like they're like it's all freedom of choice, when like
Exactly.
actually I would actually they're just trying. Here's this is this I did not plan to ask this, but since we're here, whenever someone a lot of like I think most people don't, they're like, oh, why does someone do this? And it's like, well, you have to figure out what their objective is. And most of the
Hmm.
time, I believe it's follow the money,
That's
because
actually their objective. You're right.
and so what's the financial incentive for this grift?
Yeah. So, there's a bunch. So the first is that when they move a vaccine to shared clinical decision making or individual level decision making, lawyers will then potentially consider that this vaccine may no longer be covered by something that's called the Vaccine Injury Compensation Program. So, this is a program. So, get ready. I'll do it in like 30 seconds or less. It's a program that was set up during the Reagan administration because there were a lot of claims coming against vaccine companies that weren't really based on hardcore science, but that really potential that led to a bunch of them leaving the market completely. And so the idea was you create this injury compensation program, and you go through a list of the things that could potentially be compensated, so that that program pays the people who are making the claims, so that the vaccine companies can continue to produce vaccine. Like, it becomes, like, from the perspective of litigation and lawsuits, so complicated, many of those companies will just say it's no longer worth doing this in the United States. And, like, we know that happened because it's happened before. So when they do that, all of a sudden that vaccine is no longer included in that program. And so then all of these people who technically are very interested in making money for litigation will all of a sudden start making a lot of money off litigation because that vaccine is no longer in the program. And so it is a scheme to destabilize sort of the vaccine infrastructure. And ultimately, what that does is that things that get pulled off that program all of a sudden can be rife for, like, lawsuits that may be capricious, again, and it removes the ability of the parent to necessarily be able to use that injury compensation program. So it's like forces them to go into litigation rather than through the injury compensation program. So there's money to be had. And the hepatitis B one was like the test case. They're going to go bigger and do it more. And then, like, what's going to happen is that the vaccine companies are going to run scared. Parents aren't going to know where to go to get compensated if there's something wrong that happens to their kid. And then ultimately, we're just not going to have a lot of vaccines anymore for kids to get.
Good times.
Yeah. So
It's
following the money is the right answer.
always it's there's
Yeah.
always you know, people are not like the movies where like there's just people like evil for evil's sake. Someone's always got a grift in the real world.
Yeah. There's
That's
there's there's like hidden, there's like secondary gain, as we call it in medicine, for sure.
so before I think everything is political, because it is.
Hmm.
And so anytime I end up getting a lot of political discussions because I believe that everything's political. And I was talking to a woman about the Hep B, and she was very adamant that like I do not want to get vaccines to my babies. It seemed more like a fear-based reaction, but I don't. I really choose not to. I really try not to judge people that I don't know their circumstances. And but so we were talking about this, and her opinion was, well, I I do not have Hep B, so and Hep B is a sexually transmitted disease, so why should I vaccinate my baby? And
Such a great question,
uh,
which she should ask her pediatrician, but I'm going to give you the infectious disease doctor answer. How's that?
I love that because I appreciate you telling me that because I she asked me that question and I literally told her I am not a doctor. I think that she needs to consult her physician with that. I don't think she will. But
Yeah.
please give me the infectious disease answer.
So, so hepatitis B is not just a sexually transmitted infection. It can be a sexually transmitted infection. Oh, and by the way, if the babies are protected, they won't get it when they're sexually active, years later. Just making the point.
Babies do
Um,
grow up, you know.
babies, which sometimes you would have some of the folks who are like sort of promoting these ideas. They say that you shouldn't sacrifice the health of a baby for the health of an adult, but the baby becomes an adult.
What?
Just
Crazy.
saying.
Crazy.
Yeah. Well, so the bottom line is this: that yes, like later in life, it can be a sexually transmitted infection. Totally can be transmitted from people that share drug using paraphernalia, right? Like injection material. Totally true. Um, but here's the story: like historically in the U.S., one of the most common ways in the past to get hepatitis is from your mom during childbirth. Now, the next question is, well, if mom is negative, then why am I worried? Well, so in countries where they have really good childcare and they have really good parental leave, what happens is the baby stays at home for most of the time that they're at risk for like being exposed to hepatitis B. Like we all know in the US, parental leave sucks wind. And so what happens is that the child goes into daycare sooner, right? And that means that they're exposed to people outside of their household. So when you look at the data, about 11 to 12% of hepatitis B cases in kids would happen in kids whose moms were negative because there are caregiver exposures that can lead to the infection. 11% isn't a lot, but if you think about 11% of those kids, 90% of them go on to chronic infection and 25% will die early when the thing that you're doing to prevent it is really low stakes. It's kind of a no-brainer. But again, like not saying that in a condescending way, because like it's a good
Math.
conversation to have. Like it's math. And so like if the assumption is that the hepatitis B vaccine is something really bad, that like if you give it bad things happen, then it would change your calculus. It would change your decision making. This vaccine is extremely, extremely, extremely well tolerated. very, very few side effects. Presented over and over again, the data support that it is an extremely low side effect vaccine. So what you're doing is in a place where you don't have really good childcare, where you don't have universal health care, you're creating a safety net so that there's no one who potentially doesn't get offered the vaccine at the time of soon after birth, so that you're preventing some of these very unfortunate complications. Mom is allowed to say no for the birth dose all the time. Like and clinicians totally agree, need to do a better job, like the pediatrician, in talking to the mom about this. And so does the OBGYN, so that like it's really clear that the conversation happens not after you have the baby and your brain is mush, but like that happens like sort of like before, so you know what folks' wishes are. And so that's the story. And so even bumping that dose by a couple of months, those couple of months are the time where that baby is the most susceptible. And so,
Yeah.
like in the US, historically, vaccine policy has been, if we can prevent it, we should, especially if the vaccine is safe enough to do it. So, like what the current situation says is that even if the vaccine is safe enough, it's okay for us to tolerate that some people may not be protected, which is really not, that's not what we do in the US for vaccine policy.
Yeah, it doesn't, yeah.
That's not
Doesn't
what
it
we
does
do.
yeah, I'm with you. I think one of the issues we're having with vaccine hesitancy is that we've defunded education in this country for the last 50 years, and people just don't understand math anymore.
Yeah.
I mean,
I mean,
I'm the person who, so this happened. I teach one of my side jobs. I teach group fitness,
amazing.
uh,
I used to
and
teach group fitness too.
amazing. And you don't still live in New York. I teach at Crunch, which are huge in New York.
Nice.
Um,
I used to have be a cycling instructor at my own studio.
nice. Yeah, I spin is my jam. I love it. I never stopped masking in spin classes. Because the math never, like I kept every couple months I would do the math, and I'm like, well, what's my cost? My cost is I wear this thing over my face, and it makes it a little bit harder to breathe, but I'm used to it, and it keeps me safe from getting sick and getting my family sick. I've never been able to make the math work to take my mask off, and people don't understand that, but that's cool. Switching topics a little bit. I really appreciate that answer. That was like just like even just for like me to have that more knowledge. Mwah, thank you. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Uh, why is God damn it? Why is measles making a comeback?
Yeah, so measles is a really interesting virus. It is like the canary in the coal mine. It's like the red flag because it's so contagious. So, if you have a room of like 10 people and they're all unvaccinated, and you have one person who walks in with measles, 9 out of 10 are going to get measles. The one of the most contagious viruses in the world. So, when you see measles outbreaks, it tells you that there's a problem with vaccine. Not that the vaccine's not working, but that not enough people are vaccinated in whatever the community is that has the outbreak to limit the transmission. So remember those like 10 people, if all 10 of them were vaccinated, there's a 3% chance that one of them would still get measles. Right? So it completely changes the calculus, like way on the like, you're not going to get
Not even on
measles
the
if you're
margin. It like
like
the
it's
breath. Yeah, the
yeah, it
entire
like
other way.
all the way in the other direction where like you're just not going to get it. So when you see outbreaks, and I've worked in a lot of outbreaks for measles, like it tends to mean that there's something going on in the community where the measles rate of vaccination goes down. And one of the important things about measles as well, is that it's if you are at about 95% vaccination in the community, that pretty much stops measles in its tracks, right? Because like there's enough immunity around in the community where like eventually the measles will hit a brick wall and be like, well, there's one case, that's the end.
And if it can't keep
And
spreading, it dies.
there's just nowhere for it to go. And so it's
Right.
the end. So, and measles, I think, is not just a fever and a rash, though that is like how it usually comes up. Measles can cause pneumonia in kids and adults, that can lead them to go to the intensive care unit. It can lead to death in some cases. And it does this other thing, which is really interesting, but also concerning, that's called immune amnesia. So when people have the measles, their whole immune system goes a little wonky for a while. And for like weeks to months after the infection, they're at high risk for other infections. And then a very, very small portion of people who get measles will completely get rid of the infection. And then, like, decades later, will have a devastating neurological condition, that is called sclerosing panencephalitis, which is like a fancy for saying like not a good brain thing. And so like, and they can die. And so measles is not inconsequential. It used to be that, 2,000 kids or so a year would die of measles. Then we got really good sanitation and we got really good like antibiotics to treat the infections that you get because of the immune amnesia. And the 2000 went down to about 500, but it wouldn't go down beyond 500 because there was like 2 to 4 million cases of measles every year, and about 500 kids just based on bad
Can't do
luck
it.
would end up dying from it. Once the vaccine hit and became like a routine recommendation, the effect was that boom, no measles equals no death. And we hadn't had one since 2019 until this year, where we had two kids die of measles in Texas and then one adult in another state.
Wonderful. Great.
Yeah,
It's we're killing ourselves, is what you're
it's
telling
like a
me.
canary in the coal mine. Like it's such a good virus at what it does, that when you see like, oh gosh, there's 600 cases in Texas, that means that the numbers of people vaccinated there were very low, which allowed for that to happen.
Dimitri, you're a sicko. I
I
mean,
just tell the facts.
I'm over here like in pet measles genuinely scares me because I know how contagious it is, and I'm over here
Yeah,
like my
so
my
contagious.
my skin crawling, and you're like, it's a great virus at what it
it's
does.
it's good at what it does. Like,
Yeah,
I mean, right? And that's why, like, red flag when you see the United States of America is going to lose its measles elimination status potentially this year, and it's had it since 2000. Like, what that means is that someone's breaking your public health system, because it's like the vital sign. It's like the blood pressure for the country's infectious disease public health system. If we lose elimination, that's saying that our immune system for as a country is very, very sick.
I think I might know who's breaking it.
Yeah, me
I
too.
think I think I've got a suspect. Uh, oi, yeah. You have thank you for being a bubbly and positive about the does
I mean, we can change the trajectory here, right? We
we
have
should
we
change.
have the
Can I
technology.
can I can I can I'm gonna ask something strange, but
Go
because
for it.
we're a country of vibes. I know this isn't quite your uh department isn't the right word, but you know what I mean. Uh can we work on vaccines delivered by pill or by liquid?
Yeah, I think that there's like, always, the answer is yeah. It would be good if we didn't cut vaccine funding so that we could continue to do the research that we needed to get there. But I think that definitely, and, or removing platforms like mRNA platforms, by defunding them, like what's happened so far. There's like really, so for like, there's the pill idea, but, there's other really cool things going on that could potentially be something that we do in the future. My favorite isn't a pill or a liquid. It's something called a microneedle patch, which is like, it sounds a little scary, but it's not. It looks like a band-aid and it doesn't hurt. You just put it on the kid and it's got little teensy microneedles that don't hurt, and they get vaccinated through the microneedles. And so all the like the needle fear goes away. So there's definitely like technology that's coming down the pike that could potentially make it really easy, to get vaccinated. And then there's other things like, right now as we speak, you can order, if you're under 50, or for your child, you can order nasal uh, flu vaccine that you can get in the mail. And so there's like no shot. There's a squirt in the nose, and then you're vaccinated. So like there's definitely interesting technologies, but like in a world where they're trying to dismantle all of the sort of vaccine stuff, there may not be the funding needed to be able to get those technologies like out of the laboratory, out of the clinical trial, and to people.
Yeah, yeah. That makes sense. Because I really do feel like it is because obviously I'm chronically online because I do what I do, uh, but like I feel like because it is like it's a primal fear, and I think there is like
Totally.
it is like a needle, it is a needle thing, and I think if we went to like a like I specifically I think a pill because we are so used to ingesting pills that I
Yeah.
think that I think vaccine skeptic, you know what I'm trying to say, would go down,
Skepticism. That
skepticism would
one.
go down significantly because it's a primal reaction based on vibes, and I feel like a lot of times, scientists respond with data and with information, and it doesn't hit us here. Not
Yeah.
y- I actually think you do a great job of
Thanks.
of cutting through and speaking in plain English, which is what physicians often struggle with. And man, physicians, it's not just like physicians struggle with communication. I say this
Yes.
like my both my parents are physicians. I have two siblings that are physicians. Communication is not y'all strong suit generally.
No.
So when y'all don't communicate well on vaccines, I'm like, y'all, this is just what they do. But anyway, this is a perfect transition to I get a lot of my email is public, so I get a lot of emails, and I got an email from a Dr. Joel Warsh. He hosts a podcast called Between a Shot and a Hard Place, and he posits himself as someone who is very non-judgmental about vaccines. And his email showed up in my inbox yesterday, and I saw it this morning, and so I wanted to talk to you about some of his opinions because
Sure.
in some of his posts, I'm pulling them up right now. He talks about how medical opinion should face scrutiny. And so I want to see how some of he's not a fan of vaccine mandates. We've talked about that, why vaccine mandates are important. Uh, excuse me. Yeah. Here's something that he said is about MMR, so I thought it was especially relevant.
Okay.
Uh, in his on this is a post on Instagram at Dr. Joel Gator. Everyone's blaming measles on Kennedy and HHS, but 75% of cases in 2025 are in kids/adults over the age of 5, and MMR is recommended at 1. Do the math. The decision not to vaccinate wasn't made this year. Blaming today's leadership ignores the real issue: years of fear, broken trust, and parents being shut down for asking questions. You don't rebuild trust. Now he just now that's all the information in his post. I'm wondering
Yeah.
what your thoughts are about that.
I mean, I think that, the statement that, that MMR coverage has decreased over time is true. I think that definitely when you look at kindergarten coverage, every year we are starting to sort of show decreases in kids that have been covered, for sure. So I think it's fair to say that this is not a last 12 months problem, but more of like a several years problem, and frankly exacerbated by the pandemic, made worse by the COVID-19 pandemic and all of the chaos that happened around sort of how people perceive vaccine then. However, like I have never, in my experience working in public health, had someone making the call from the inside of the house, trying to destabilize people's confidence in vaccine even further. So, while we were fighting to try to prevent vaccine measles cases in Texas, 90+% of them were in unvaccinated kids, right? While we were fighting to do that, we had a Secretary of Health and Human Services saying that the measles vaccine isn't very good and that it has fetal parts and all sorts of things that are just not true. So I would argue that though it is correct that this is a fire that's been burning for a while, Kennedy just threw propane on it to try to make it burn faster. And so that is not appropriate for someone who is looking after the health of the entire country. So I will agree with the premise, and then add on top of that that he has added accelerant to a fire to try to make it worse faster.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Thanks for clearing that up. The other thing that, and this is really important to me, because I have a school aged child, is Dr. Gator thinks that bringing back religious exemptions for vaccine mandates would actually help improve our vaccine rate. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but I'm interested in your expert opinion on that.
Yeah. So so the data are that I think there's a growing number of states in the U.S. that are using non-medical exemptions and and are being more permissive for non-medical exemptions. And then the effect of that is that they're no longer able to achieve the 95% population immunity needed to prevent measles transmission, as well as many other viruses. So the reality of that experiment is that in states that they are doing it and increasing the number of non-medical exemptions, we're below the level of what would protect the community from big outbreaks. So, we're able to sort of, again, this is an experiment that I wouldn't love to see, but I mean, I think that if we're seeing more states increasing the ability to have these non-medical exemptions, I think that we're going to probably see fewer protected children and ultimately more outbreaks of infectious diseases that will also end up closing schools if we have enough of it happen. So, when you look at the South Carolina measles outbreak, so there were some cases, but then there was like hundreds of kids that were excluded from school because they weren't vaccinated. So, I think that I think it's a little bit magical thinking to say that you're going to sort of make it, acceptable to not be vaccinated, especially in this current environment, and then expect that somehow the vaccine rates are going to become high enough to protect from outbreaks. So I disagree on that one.
Yeah, I did too, but
Yeah.
I always like to hear from an expert when I can.
Yeah, I get what he's going for, but it's not
I
what actually happens.
If I didn't think he were also a wolf in sheep's clothing, trying to like, whenever it's like whenever someone like talks about their general politics, they're like, listen, I'm not right, I'm not left, and then the next thing that comes out of their mouth is going to be some of the most right wing
But
shit you have ever heard,
right,
and
but
he was giving me those vibes, and the magical thinking just lines up on that. It's like, give
yeah,
me the benefit of the doubt, even though I'm completely disingenuous, because once you've given me that benefit, I can take advantage of you. So my son is autistic, and my main niche online is I talk about, I live within the autism parenting community.
thank you for
So
doing that.
thank you. It's a lot. It's a lot, and every time RFK or Trump decides to put our name in their mouth, it's a whole thing. It's a
Yeah,
whole thing.
I feel like I feel really bad for you know parents of kids with autism because they're just being made pawns in
Yes.
this crazy game. And it's like I just need to sort of say that with like a lot of empathy, because like there's so much going on, and like I think ultimately like there's just this isn't a game, this is people's lives and their children. And so whenever sort of as a doctor I see folks that are being commodified in a way to sort of achieve another goal, like it just makes me really angry and sad. So
And I
just want
see
to
it.
send love and thank you.
Thanks, I appreciate it. It makes me angry because I see it for what it is, and I see desperate parents being taken advantage
Totally.
of. It's the classic snake oil salesman, like that's been going on for hundreds of years. Find a desperate mark, make big promises, and unfortunately, it still works,
Yeah.
hook line and sinker. I really try to be professional on my page, but I managed to still call RFK Jr. names because he just gets under my skin so much.
I mean,
uh,
you come from a very important point of view on that, so
I really appreciate you taking the time
thank you.
and doing all the work. I'm sure that I have no idea what's next for you now that you don't have a day job, but
I
consider
have a day job soon, very soon.
Are
I'm
you?
moving back to moving back to New York. I'm going to be working for a community health center in Manhattan. So that's going to be putting me close to like a lot of the sort of initial like HIV, STD, LGBT work that I used to do back in the day. So going back to my roots.
I love that.
Yeah, me
Fantastic.
too.
Glad to see that you are still in the fight, and I'm sure it's going to be more gratifying to actually be on the ground a little bit more.
Exciting.
Thank you so much for your time, Demetri. Really appreciate
Yeah.
you.
Thank you so much.